And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, what are we going to talk about today? Did anything happen this week?
Never a dull Klatch. So how about we talk about the debate, but let's frame it as what did we learn and what's happening next?
Okay, that debate occurred Tuesday night, as I remember.
2
but
years
everybody's
ago.
been talking about it since then. And it was really kind of a milestone. It was watched by how many people? It was more than people, more
60,
than.
yeah, 67 million.
And that's about 30% more people than the people who watched the June 27th debate between Biden and Trump. So this is a much, much bigger deal.
It's a huge deal. Also, think about it. 154 million voters voted in the presidential election of 2020. So that's more than a third of that number. And then let's think about all the people that have seen the clips and the memes and the takedowns and the raw footage online. It's a lot of people.
This was very, very important in terms of Kamala Harris introducing herself to the American people, because the New York Times Siena poll that came out just before, last Sunday, that poll said that 28% of Americans felt they needed to know more about her before they could form an opinion. So we all assume that Kamala Harris was known by everybody, but obviously she wasn't, and perhaps still isn't, at least to the extent that people need to know more about her. But that debate helped a great deal. And Heather, who won the debate?
I mean, depends who you ask. I mean, according to reality, Kamala Harris won the debate. According to the CNN poll that came right out after, she won by a lot of numbers. What was it? 63 to 37.
Absolutely. According to every poll I've seen, including, importantly, polls in the swing states, she came out ahead. Now, it's not clear what that means. We'll get into this in a moment in terms of what it means actually in terms of voting, but it was quite amazing. I don't want to spend too much time because we've already spent a lot of time talking about that debate, but I was interested. The New York Times did almost a second-by-second analysis of that debate, and they found that Kamala Harris used far more of her time to attack Donald Trump than Donald Trump used of his time to attack her. Now, it's interesting because my impression, now you and I were there, we were hosting a watch-along, my impression was that Trump was much more on the attack, but I think that's because he sounds constantly negative and attacking, but she actually, in terms of the points that she made and landed and caused him to get flummoxed and really show his angry, awful side, she made more punches and they landed much harder.
Well, it felt like she was at a debate. It felt like she was saying Donald Trump right there and having a conversation that was very pointed and very specific and evidence-based, God forbid. And he never said her first name, never said her last name, said she, her, and they and them the whole time. So it felt, it was just the tone, it was the presence. And with her, it felt like feedback or criticisms. It didn't feel like the attacks that he did so blatantly. But his gears are what? Whining, bragging, and lying. That's
whining,
all.
bragging. That's it. That's all there
gears.
is. But I thought she set the tone when she went over and she introduced herself. I'm Kamala Harris. And she shook his hand, even though he obviously didn't. She even went behind his podium to do that. That's a famous and very important moment. I thought, honestly, from that moment on, she ruled the roost. She, in fact, dominated him. And Donald Trump, without being dominating, that's his that's what he does. He dominates. If he couldn't dominate, he was lost. And I think he was lost.
And also, he's a germaphobe, and she knows it. So it was a power play. It was a watch me do the thing that I know creeps you out. And then it was also, this is how to pronounce my name. Really? Like he can no longer say he doesn't know. She said it to his face. I thought.
And the clips, you're absolutely right. The clips that followed, particularly with regard to the Springfield, Ohio, the Haitians who Donald Trump said were eating pets. I mean, it caused her to laugh, which was the appropriate response. And she said, extreme. That's exactly right. He exposed himself as being out of his gourd.
Right. It really was deranged, but we have to be very clear. It is also blatant racism and very scary what he's doing because there are impacts, right? You heard earlier this week there were bomb threats in Springfield. I mean, this cannot be. Yes, there's lots of memes and there's humor, and we do need that, but we also have to see it for what it is, and it is not funny.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is that the Haitians who are in Springfield are there legally. They are not there illegally. They're not undocumented. Also, there was no evidence whatever of anybody taking somebody else's pet. And thirdly, the accident. There was an accident a year ago in which a Haitian did accidentally hit a bus with a car that caused one child, sadly, to be killed. The parents of that child got on the broadcast news.
I saw that. Yeah.
Saying, I mean, just heart-wrenching. They said, Trump and Vance, stop using our child for political purposes.
I know, as a pawn. It's horrible.
It didn't stop Vance, and I doubt that it's going to stop Trump. Because what these people do is they dig in, and they went, even when they're in a hole, they dig further. They just don't give up.
I know it. And then we'll have to see what this means for Election Day, right? More polls will be coming out. They're already, both of them, Harris and Trump, are on the trail again. I'm hoping that she will be showing more appearances on the news. I said that when we were at the debate, and I stick by it. And it's interesting, people don't know enough about her. My sense is we're still going to be seeing that in the polls for weeks to come, which I think is ridiculous. So I don't love that, if I'm honest. It feels like not true.
Well, I wonder, whenever I see somebody, at least in the last 3 days, say I need more information, I don't know whether that's in fact what's going on. I can't help think, and maybe they don't admit it to themselves, that the idea of voting for a woman, and a woman of color, is so deeply difficult, reprehensible to them, that they say they need more information.
Bingo.
Because they can't sort of get it into their heads that this is the leader. This is the next leader of the United States.
Right. And let's keep in mind, the collective, and Kamala Harris herself, are not leaning into her gender and race. And I love that because she is just a presidential candidate. I mean, she has the energy. We'll talk about that. But it is what it is. And what's so terrific is it's so monumental, but we're not still talking about that. We know, I wrote this down, in terms of how many governors there are who are women in this country, 12 out of 50. I mean, that's 24%. And then in the Senate, we know it's 50-50. And then 125 women are in the House of Representatives. This does not represent the population, and there has never been a woman president, and there has never been a woman of color who is president. But I like that this is not something that is constantly being talked about. It's issues, and it's better things than that. Not better, but excuse me. Go ahead.
No, excuse me. Speaking of not speaking over
Forgive me.
a woman, forgive me. But I was going to say Taylor Swift,
Yes.
who I think really does in many ways. She represents the next generation. And that's what we're talking about here. It's not so much a woman, it's the next generation. It's energy, it's youth, it's where America is going. And for Taylor Swift to endorse Kamala Harris in such a sophisticated way.
Yes.
It wasn't just, I endorse her. She said, well, I have weighed the arguments. I've thought about it. You do it for yourself, but I am telling you, I am endorsing her because I think she's a leader for our time and so on. I just thought that was a perfect capstone to the evening.
It was, and the timing was fantastic. I just watched the debate. It was brilliantly done. And we'll see what it actually means, right? So all these people and young people are going to be registering to vote, right?
Yes, in fact, the data I saw, Heather, was that something in the order of 360,000 people soon after Taylor Swift recommended that they register, did register.
Yes.
And the number by today may be sort of in the 600, 700,000. But these are young people, most of them who had not registered, and I think more power to them.
Right. Will she show up on the ground in Pennsylvania for a rally? I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's even more she could do to rally all the Swifties and the Swift independents
Yes.
who are prone to listen to Taylor Swift. I don't know.
And one of my one of the people in America who I think is one of the worst people in America, the richest person in the world.
Here we go.
Well,
I know who you're going to talk about.
The person who called me a miniature wanker,
We
Elon
have
Musk.
to bring that up again.
What did he say to Taylor
He
Swift?
said, hold on. Fine, Taylor, you win. This was on X, his tedious platform. You win. I will give you a child and guard your cats with my life. Because what she did was she signed it as a childless cat lady, which of course is a reference to J.D. Vance being misogynistic and with his quotes from the past. And that is what Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who owns that and dominates that platform, put out. It is inappropriate and foul.
And let me just also say, Elon Musk is a CEO of some of the biggest companies in America, not just the platform X, but also SpaceX and Starlink. And I mean, the shareholders of these companies now they know, I mean, there's no doubt about it. They have a CEO who is as close to a CEO can come to Donald Trump in term and J.D. Vance in terms of saying outrageous, sexist, ridiculous things.
I know. Anything else from the polls to note? I mean, so looking ahead to the election, is there going to be another debate? I asked you that the other night when we were watching. What do you think? What does this mean? What's going to happen in the next 7.5 weeks?
I think that Trump does not want another debate. He knows in his heart of hearts, he says that, of course, I won the debate. Of course, that's what he would say. But he doesn't want to face her again. I think he knows intuitively that that would be disaster. She's much better at it than he is. But I think that she does want another debate. Now, the interesting question is, would she go along with another debate if it were on Fox News?
I know.
Now, he says, I want it on Fox News. And he says, I want the moderators to be, some of the Sean Hannity types, the opinionated.
Of course he
Fox
does.
News.
He probably wants them to be J.D. Vance, Laura Loomer, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, of course we know who he would want as the moderators. Do you think she'll do it?
I think she should not do it, but I think she should do it if it's one of the Fox News people rather than the opinion people, because I think that would give her access to a lot of Americans who may not know who she is, even if she peeled off a very small number of Fox viewers.
Right.
That would be a good thing.
Right, and it's following in the footsteps of Pete Buttigieg, who is so great on Fox News these days, and he just goes and says his one-liners that are fantastic and based in reality. So if it's a version of that she can achieve, I think it would be fantastic. I bet she would do it. But again, I want her on I would love to see her on more news shows. So this whole idea of I need to get to know her more. People could get to know her more, though they're still going to put that on their polls as needing even more. We know.
I agree. You mentioned just now Laura Loomer. Talk about a Looney Tunes. She was at the 9/11. She's talked about 9/11 as being an inside job, a conspiracy. And who does Trump ask to join him at the 9/11 ceremony? But Laura Looney.
I know.
It's really. It's so disrespectful of the people who lost loved ones in 9/11, of the nation, to do that. And of course, Trump doesn't care.
And it's so typical. I mean, of course that's what he does. And we're just, again, there's this sane washing. We're so used to it. But it's just, it's horrible. It's horrible to see this, everything he does, even just this week alone. And his base is still going to support him.
Well, I think this is an important point in terms of the future. The 40% of Americans who are the Trump base, they're not going anywhere. I think that they have stuck with him since 2016. They are going to continue to stick with him. The 40% of Americans who hate Trump are going to continue to hate Trump. The 20% of Americans in the middle I think some of them are now migrating over to Harris. But of course, the critical question is Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. What about those people? And also, what about the counties and precincts in those swing states? Is she attracting some of those people? Because remember, and we've talked about this many, many times before, Heather, that night, that 2020 election was won by Joe Biden by something in the order of 44,000 votes in those key precincts and counties in those key states. And that's the same number of votes that Hillary Clinton lost by to Donald Trump in those key states. So, as much as we would love the popular vote to be determinative, obviously it is not.
No, the Electoral College stands. But it's so interesting to watch after the debate when you see these articles or these talkbacks with independents, hi, now we're talking to independents. But they all seem to, or they're picked because they lean, to me, Republican, soft Republican. It's interesting. What does independent mean these days? And so if you see someone as independent on self-declared on a poll, I wonder if it's the same independent that it might have been a year ago, 10 years ago. It's an interesting time.
It's an interesting time. It's a good question. I mean, I've said this before. I don't trust the polls particularly because some people, and I know, and I've even met them, some Republicans are embarrassed to tell pollsters that they are for Trump. They look at pollsters as professionals, as people who have more education than they do, or whatever the reason. They won't say the truth. So there is a bias in the polls.
Yeah, for sure. That observation bias. And then, but also there's a bias in people who are not going to be admitting that they're voting for a woman of color either, right? So which bias is we'll have to see which bias wins out. Also, I mean, I just think one other thing that came out of are we going to have to watch the vice presidential debate together? We are, right? Are we in on it? Are we doing it?
Heather, when you say have to, I mean, what do you have to?
You
don't have to do anything.
No, I want to.
You are a free agent.
I want to.
I mean, if you will do it, I'll do it. If you're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it.
No, we are watching it live. We will we will watch it together and we will give fact checking. It'll be a different fact checking experience than the last one because Trump did his Gish Gallop where it's so many nonstop lies. But I think J.D. Vance is kind of a one lie at a time kind of guy. So it'll be easier perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see J.D. Vance. I think comes pretty close to Elon Musk in terms of character and temperament.
In his dreams, he'd have that power.
Yeah, and he's not going away. I mean, if Trump loses the election, you can bet J.D. Vance will be the Republican nominee, or certainly among the very small number of Republican potential nominees for president 2028. J.D. Vance is there. I think he's sort of a noxious character, but
sort of.
But put him next to one of the really most warmest characters in American politics,
Affable.
Which is Tim Walz. It'll be interesting to see.
You saw that JD came out, JD Vance came out and said about Taylor Swift, I don't really like her music and blah, 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 blah. But, a billionaire, or people don't really care about her. She's a billionaire who's disconnected from working people or something like that, he said. So are these endorsements, right? Are they going to work against?
Well, it's a good question.
Democrat. It's interesting how they respond.
It's very interesting because you've got not just Taylor Swift, obviously, and not just the Republican, the Democratic establishment. You'd have increasingly the Republican establishment. I mean, to have Dick Cheney. I mean, I honestly, Heather, if you had asked me, would I ever be working this hard for a Democratic presidential candidate who Dick Cheney supports? I said it can't possibly be. But 200 former Bush administration officials have now come out in favor of Kamala Harris. So I think the danger here, and it includes a lot of entertainers, Oprah and others. The danger is that it reinforces the sense that that this is the establishment coming to boost Kamala Harris, and that Trump is the anti-establishment candidate. There's a danger here.
Exactly.
I don't want to dwell on it. I hope it is not materialized, doesn't come to fruition, but I think there is a potential danger.
Right, and they jumped on it immediately. But I do think the Republicans that are endorsing her, that one's so interesting because they're basically saying we care more about democracy than our party, right? And we have to uphold the rule of law. And I think, too, one thing out of the debate was foreign policy. To me, I don't remember foreign policy being kind of so at the forefront of, and I know that on average in polls, foreign policy falls down in terms of what's important, and kitchen table economics is more important. But him being so pro-Putin and so against our place in the world and our democracy at home is really scaring people. And it would be great, I think, if we play this up going forward as a real threat.
I think you're absolutely right. Can you imagine? I mean, given his support for Putin, given his, and we're talking about Donald Trump,
Yes.
and his isolationism, and his willingness to put up these gigantic tariffs, which are really a sales tax on America, and all of the other ways in which he is repudiating and continues to repudiate classic republicanism. Or even as late as George W. Bush republicanism. I think that it must be hard for the elected Republicans, who are now majority Trumpers, who are election deniers. That's how they are surviving. How can they manage? It's getting harder and harder for them. And if Trump is defeated, as I hope he will be, what happens to all of these MAGA Republicans? Is it got like the emperor's new clothes? They suddenly say, well, I've seen the light. I didn't really mean to support Donald Trump. Or do they try to hold on somehow to, I mean, they've already lost their integrity. They have no scruples. What do they hold on to?
I don't know, but digging themselves out of that ditch is going to take time and money and oof. I mean, hopefully
Well, I think
they do it.
The Republican Party of George W. Bush is dead. It's gone.
Yeah.
It is buried. And a new Republican Party has to. I mean, I am a believer in a two-party system. I think
know it.
democracy requires it. But I don't know how you revive a Republican Party after what's happened to it, after this extraordinary show, this display from these Republican officials of a lack of any principle at all.
I know it. Well, I'm happy to be on this ride with you while the eventification of all of these. I mean, I don't remember this excitement, trepidation, all these big feelings around these political events. I mean, I do remember. Was it Palin? Who was it? It was Palin back in the day?
Sarah Palin? Yes,
Yeah.
I remember her.
But I mean, I'm like, let's watch this VP debate. I mean, I don't think I've ever said that before. I can't.
No, you
The
haven't said
countdown
it
is
to
on.
me before.
Well, we're watching it.
Yeah, but it's October 1st, and I am putting it in my calendar. Everybody
Yes.
out there, by the way, thank you, everybody out there, for joining us, and Heather, and for me, joining us with regard to last Tuesday. And Heather, thank you. You did a terrific job.
Well, I thought you were pretty great too. It's funny to try and not speak over them, but also keep up with the pacing. And people said they like to be able to watch it with us. Watch-alongs are what the cool kids do these days with sports and gaming. So we're in the cool kid crowd, right, Bob?
That's right.
I don't know. If
Heather,
you say that, you're not in the cool kid crowd.
Before we wind up today, I
Yeah.
did want to mention that yesterday was the third anniversary. No, not the third anniversary. The anniversary of the Violence Against Women Act.
30th.
It was signed 30th. It was
Yeah.
signed into law. I was there in 1994. Bill Clinton signed it into law. A very, very important act. And I remember at the time just feeling just this energy. It was incredibly important that women be protected, and there was a feeling, I remember in the White House and elsewhere, that that one of the most important responsibilities of government was to protect those who are, generally speaking, weaker from people who are brutalizing them. And I think for the first few years, it had a very positive effect.
Yeah, physically weaker. Yeah, 55% of female homicides, femicides, I think is another word for it, are perpetrated by someone very close to them in their family or a domestic partner. I mean, the numbers are through the roof. Tell us more about that, though. I want to know about your time in the 90s around that.
Well, I mean, first of all, I
Give
want
it
to
to
just
us.
say that the Violence Against Women Act, as important as it was, the Supreme Court gutted one of the most important provisions having to do with enforcement, saying that this provision violates the Constitution because it's violence against women is not in interstate commerce, and therefore the federal government should not have jurisdiction. And one of the
Convenient.
people signing that opinion was Clarence Thomas, who I remember distinctly, Heather. I mean, as long as we're going down memory lane together.
About Clarence Thomas in the 90s? Here we
Yes.
go.
I mean, in 1991, Clarence Thomas was at his confirmation hearing in 1991. Clarence Thomas was opposed, you remember, some of you, I hope you remember, by a black woman named Anita Hill, who claimed that Clarence Thomas had really harassed her with all kinds of sexual jokes and innuendo. Not jokes to her, obviously. I mean, he was really abusive they were both at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which he chaired or headed, and she was a staff member there. And she faced this Judiciary Committee, all white men.
That's it.
That Judiciary Committee, by the way, not incidentally, headed by, guess who? Joe Biden, Senator Joe Biden, but all white men who gave her a terrible time. I mean, they really ridiculed her. And ultimately, obviously, Clarence Thomas was confirmed. But it was just like Brett Kavanaugh being confirmed. When you have a woman who said she was abused by Brett Kavanaugh, they didn't pay attention.
I know.
I mean, at a time of the Violence Against Women Act, we should remember that these Supreme Court justices, at least two of them, were, I think, guilty of sexual abuse. Anita Hill was my colleague at Brandeis. Her office was right next to mine. This is after the hearings.
Right, Professor Hill.
And we talk about what happened, and it was so clear to me. I've met very few people, honestly, in my life who have as much integrity and common sense and kindness as Anita Hill. And the idea that she would lie about something like that is absurd. I mean, she was telling the absolute truth.
Yeah, but he got away with it. And these are the adjudicators at the highest point in our country and our democracy.
Well, and their opinion, I mean, obviously these two and others, they, in the Dobbs opinion, overruling Roe against Wade, again, that is part of the violence against women. One out of three women in this country she lives in a state where she does not have the right over her body, to make a decision about an abortion. Right. One out of three women right now. I mean, talk about violence against women.
I know, it's horrific. Abortion care. I like the phrase abortion care, because that's what we need. On that note, sometimes I like to do a fun segment at the end of these Klatches. Sometimes I surprise you with them. But this week, I think I'm just going to say, what did I like from your Substack? There's a lot of Substacks, and I liked the one this week where you talked about tall energy, and you talked about Donald Trump already dissing Kamala before they even got out, Kamala Harris, on stage, and he was talking about their height and the fact that he's taller than she is. Shocker of the century. But you had such a good Substack. Will you tell us a little bit about how you got in trouble in the past? Or,
I've never got in trouble. Now, Heather,
there was a headline about you.
Heather, I know what you're talking about. Well, when I ran for office once before. I ran for the Democratic nomination for governor of the state of Massachusetts in 2002. And I often joked about my height because people, I'm very short. Heather, you don't know this, but I am very, very
No.
short. Well, you do know this,
I
but
guess I've
I'm
noticed.
getting a bit shorter as I get older.
We all are.
But when you're in politics, the short person almost never wins in politics,
Right.
because who knows? I mean,
There's
there have been
studies about this. Yeah.
There's studies about this. That genetically we are programmed to want to have a tall, big person protecting us. So I used to joke about my height very often, but I did get in. Fox News really went after me.
And you had that, wasn't it in a newspaper too? I mean, you were in so much trouble. I think we might have a clip.
Oh.
The short jokes began when Robert Reich had to climb up on a box behind a podium to announce his candidacy for governor of Massachusetts.
But at least I stand firmly on my platform.
Ever since, Reich, the former labor secretary, has been turning what could be a liability into a punchline.
Sometimes I start out lectures or discussions, particularly when time is limited, and I say something like, they've asked me to be short. And it usually takes the audience about 2 seconds to catch on to the fact that I am joking.
At 4 feet 10 inches tall, Reich has no shortage of material.
When I was Secretary of Labor, I used to stand up in front of business audiences and say, do I really look like big government? And I do it, again, because there's just not enough humor in public life.
Well, Heather, that Fox News went on, and they, not only Fox News, but the conservative papers in Boston, they went on to attack me because they said that short people around the country were angry with me for making fun of my height. I mean, hello.
You have been through it. I mean, even thinking about Elon Musk 2 weeks ago. Well, this has been terrific. Thank you for obliging us when we want to dig into the archives and make you suffer and watch yourself.
Thank you for digging into the archives and making me once again suffer. But Heather, thank you again personally for everything you're doing and for your talent and for your just a wonderful, wonderful self. I don't know how you do this. I don't know how you every week or twice a week.
Too kind. I learned
hours
from the best.
Well,
Learn
anyway,
from the shortest.
Everybody out from the shortest. Everybody out there, thank you for joining us today. We will see you very, very soon, and have a great and safe week. Bye-bye.